Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be building the last of the hardware that I need before I can start building the actual box and finishing this project. Here you can see that I'm a little bit further along. I riveted the frame that I made last week to the lock back plate, and I've included a spacer that's going to fill the gap between the sheet metal cover of the box and the lock back plate. I've also cut out the keyhole in the piece of sheet metal that I'm going to be using for the top of the box. It's oversized right now, but it'll be trimmed to shape later on. And the keyhole was cut out exactly the same way that I cut out the keyhole for the back plate. And the riveting is just standard rivets that are made from straight bar stock. The next piece that I roughed out is a cover plate that's going to be fitted over top of the keyhole. Normally this type of arrangement holds the wards, which are obstructions that the key needs to fit around to be able to work in the lock. But this lock doesn't have any wards, so this cover plate really just serves two purposes. Firstly, it prevents anything from inside of the box to interfere with the key as you're trying to open the lock. And secondly, it just provides a pivot point for the end of the key so that as you turn it around, it rotates very smoothly. The only forging being done today is going to be to make the half of the hinge that's going to attach to the lid of the box. That part of the hinge is made from a 3/8 square bar, and I'm using the cross peen to draw out a very long, narrow section. Here I have the piece cut from the bar, and I'm going to be using a file to refine the shape. Once I've roughed in the shoulder that's actually going to define the barrel of the hinge, I take it back to the lock plate and mark off the dimensions that I need to fit it onto the frame. This half of the hinge is going to be mounted on that narrow lip that just extends beyond the back plate. Once the excess has been cut away, I just continue refining the profile of the hinge blank with files. And of course I need to repeat this process for the hinge on the other side of the lock plate. The other half of this hinge is going to be made up of two small tabs that are going to get brazed directly to the frame that's going to be mounted to the top of the base of the box. To create these tabs, I just used a hacksaw to cut them from a 1/2-inch square bar. I started by sawing out the profile of the tabs, and then I sawed the bar in half. Once I had enough material sawn back, I was able to just cut them from the bar. Here I'm a little bit further along, and I have the tabs inserted into the frame for the top rim of the box. To create the hole, I just used the drill bit to drill 2 holes to rough out the main dimensions of the mortise, and then I used a chisel to cut away the web in between the 2 drill holes. Same process I used many times on this lock. I used a drill bit that was the exact thickness of the pins, but I made a mortise that was wider than the pins so that I could still have a tight fit to drive the pins in place, but I wouldn't have to worry about squaring up the hole. And I'm just going to allow the brazing rod to fill in any gaps. And here again, this brazing process is pretty standard. I'm just experimenting here with a little bit different camera angle and camera settings to see if I can get a clearer shot of the process. I normally don't pour the borax in the fire because it just tends to make a real mess, but I did it here just so I wouldn't have to move the piece and, reset up the camera. I find that it does a better job when you remove the piece from the fire and, coat the piece with borax so you can rotate it around, make sure that every section of the piece is covered. However, there are situations where, that really isn't practical to do. So I do have a flux spoon that I use in situations where it really just isn't practical to be moving the piece. I usually let the piece cool down quite a bit before I remove it. The brazing rod does freeze at about a dark, yellow-orange heat, but I usually let it get right down to a red before I remove it. So at this point I have the sections of the hinge just jammed together so you can get an idea of the relationship and how it's all going to work together. The last thing that I'm going to be doing this week is doing all the file work that I need to do to clean up the profile of the key. Using a vise insert is a pretty standard approach for holding small, awkward pieces in a vise, but they don't have to be very elaborate. So for this key, I'm just going to be using 2 blocks of wood. They're not even hinged together, and I'm just going to set them in the vise, and the wood's going to hold the key firmly enough for any file work that I need to get done, and it's going to be very easy to just rotate the piece around in the vise just by loosening the jaws ever so slightly. And at that point, it's pretty much just a matter of going over the entire surface with whatever file will fit the profile that I'm working on, and just keep working around, filing a little bit at a time, and keeping the file moving so I don't file any flat spaces. I'm after smooth curves, so I want to keep the file moving in an arc all the time, so I'm not filing in one spot. Here I'm using a half round needle file to start defining the shapes of the key. The half round needle file, and full-size file for that matter, is probably one of the most versatile files there is, because you can stand the file up on edge and cut very narrow lines. The half-round face allows you to reach into all the hollow sections of the turnings, and the flat face allows you to turn the outside radiuses of all the turnings. So this one file does a pretty good job of simulating a turned cross-section. I'm cutting in a line, I'm just following the line that I turned on the lathe, and I'm just slowly bringing up all the shapes of the profile. I'm not filing in any one spot too long. I just file a little bit, rotate it, file some more. And one thing that you can't really see too well from this angle is that I'm also tipping the file around the profile of the, or that is around the radius of the shaft of the key, so it allows me to file in, a rounded looking surface. It doesn't have to be perfectly round, it just has to be circular, and as long as the lines match up, unless you spin it, it'll look like a turned shaft, but it'll have a hand-made texture to it because of the file marks. To get to the center of the shaft, I'm going to need to cut away quite a bit of the jaw insert. So I'm just going to cut a notch at the top that's going to allow me to get a file into the center section. I don't want to cut it too deep because I don't want to lose the strength of the, the clamping power of the heavier wood. So I'm just cutting away what I need to file in the profile. And now that I have it clamped in place, I'm just going to continue with the half-round needle file to define the entire profile. I'll just work my way around until I get everything done. This center section is a little easier to clean up because I turned it so that a small chainsaw file would fit into that radius. Hi, I'm Dennis, and thanks for watching. If you have questions and you want to contact me directly, you can do so by emailing me at either one of the addresses that I have listed here. It may take me a couple of days, but I will get back to you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.